A reading from the book of Ecclesiastes. There is an appointed time for everything, and a time for everything under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot the plant, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to be far from embraces, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to rend and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. What advantage has the worker from his toil? I have considered the task that God has appointed for the sons of men to be busied about. He has made everything appropriate to its time and has put the timeless into their hearts without man's ever discovering from beginning to end the work which God has done. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Responsorial Psalm. Blessed be the Lord, my rock.
Blessed be the Lord, my rock.
Blessed be the Lord, my rock, my mercy and my fortress, my stronghold and my deliverer, my shield in whom I trust.
Blessed be the Lord, my rock.
Lord, what is man that you notice him? The Son of Man that you take thought of him. Man is like a breath, his days like a passing shadow.
Blessed be the Lord, my rock. Alleluia, 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 alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke. Once, when Jesus was praying in solitude, and the disciples were with him, he asked them, "Who do the crowds say that I am?" They said in reply, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others, one of the ancient prophets has risen." Then he said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter said in reply, "The Christ of God." He rebuked them and directed them not to tell this to anyone. He said, "The Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
It is perhaps at first listening rather a fatalistic first reading. You know, there's a time for everything and that's just the way it is. And yet there's a truth to it. You know, there is a time, and in some cases we know when that time is going to be, in other cases we don't. The martyrs that we celebrate today, one, barely out of his 20s, I think, when he was the king of Bohemia, was murdered on the way to church by his brother. Okay? And so Wenceslaus had no idea that that morning was going to be his last morning on earth. Lorenzo Ruiz and his companions, on the other hand, they probably had a pretty good sense. They knew that by coming into Japan at that point, they were already violating the edicts of the emperor, and so they knew that they were on thin ice at that point. And so their martyrdom is not the same as the martyrdoms of Paul Miki and his companions. They were all, I think not all of them, but many of them were in fact Japanese. In this case, we have foreign missionaries also who come to Japan, and particularly from the Philippine Islands. They know what is going to be happening to them. In both of those cases, there's a sense. There's a sense. I think I've shared this with you before, that in the chapel of the Little Sisters of the Poor, there is in the sacristy a little card, and it just says, is addressing the priest, celebrate this Mass as though it were your first Mass. Celebrate this Mass as though it were your last Mass. Celebrate this Mass as though it were your only Mass. You can say the same thing for congregations. Participate in this Mass as though it were your first, or your last, or your only. Because it might be. We don't know that this might not be any one of our last Masses together. There's a time for everything, and we don't know it. So we might ask the Lord, okay, Lord, how would I live? What might I change if I knew infallibly that this would be my last day on earth? How would I live? What changes might I make? How would I act? That's not a bad meditation. It's not a bad meditation at all. And with the inspiration of Saints Wenceslaus and Lorenzo Ruiz and his companions, we may ask the Lord to help us to focus that mentality and that meditation today and see what changes and differences it would make in our own lives of prayer, of faith, and of action. Let us stand and pray.